You're listening to the Infinite Banking Mastery Podcast. Did you know that you could build a tax-free pool of wealth that's liquid and accessible all your life while building your retirement nest egg? Gain full control of your financial future and stop relying on the government and banks. The wealthy have already discovered this wealth-building secret. Now it's your turn to get financially secure without following the conventional wisdom that keeps you in debt to banks. Now here's your host, Valerie LaRocque.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Infinite Banking Mastery Podcast. I'm glad you're here. I wanted to share today liquidity needs at death. What are these liquidity needs that we have after passing away? And of course, the infinite banking concept is all about how to grow a pool of cash and use that money in your lifetime, not after you pass away. The exciting thing is to use the money in your lifetime for things that you need, things that you want to take over, certain debts, and also, of course, investments that you're interested in. So that's the excitement, of course, of infinite banking. But as a side effect, we have this side effect that happens to be a death benefit, kind of like a bonus. For a lot of people, that is a key benefit to the whole infinite banking process because it leaves that legacy, it leaves that death benefit, and that's a huge part of it. For others who may not have a family or spouse, the death benefit may be quite disinteresting, something that you don't care about at all. Unless you have a charity you'd really be excited to leave it to. That may be really no part of your excitement for the infinite banking concept, but there still is one. There still is a death benefit. And so why would that be needed? And I just wanted to go over some of those needs after death for those that do have family and people they care about that they're leaving behind. What's going to happen after you pass away? And what are some of those needs? So it's important to have sufficient liquid resources available to pay for things that are needed after a loved one dies. That is very important. There are all sorts of things and costs that you're going to have to pay for, such as medical expenses. They might have a really high medical expense right before you or your loved one passes away. The medical expenses could be high. Funeral expenses, of course, administration costs, the needs of your surviving family members. That's certainly a big one. And let's not forget about the potential estate and inheritance taxes. Now, you could hold a life insurance inside of a trust called an ILET, which is a way to keep the dollar amount of the death benefit outside of your gross estate. Although that is a strategy that's most often used for people with larger estates, especially now because the federal estate tax exemption is almost at 13 million, just shy of 13 million. And so that just means you can transfer that property to your heirs up to that amount without having to pay tax. However, that exemption amount is dropping in 2026. So we'll be coming down and capturing more estate taxes from people with lower estates. So this may or may not apply to you, this option. For those of you who might consider this idea, keep in mind that it's best to have that policy be owned by the trust from day one to keep the proceeds of the policy truly protected. You'd want to have it inside the trust. You'd want to have the trust purchase the policy, really. Of course, I have to throw in that I am not an attorney. I am definitely not an attorney. I have to state that disclaimer. So for any kind of estate planning you want to do, if you're wondering what kind of trusts will work best for you and your family, you definitely want to find an attorney, an estate planning attorney near you who you trust that can help you figure out what's the best fit for your family and help you to hopefully minimize estate taxes if you have that issue in your future, possibly. Also, they can help you figure out if you have young children, what kind of trust will be best so that your children will be taken care of if you and your spouse or their guardian would pass away before the child is old enough to take care of the resources or to take care of themselves. You can have all of that arranged by an attorney, and they will draft those documents for you and make sure it's a good plan and a good fit for you. Of course, I would be happy to connect with your attorney or your tax advisor. If I'm working with you, if you are a client of mine and we're trying to plan something for you, I would be happy to correlate and talk with them for your benefit to make sure that we are all on the same page for the benefit of your estate plan and your overall future plan. If you're in Washington, I do have a team of attorneys that I could direct you to for help with any of that. I just want to point out too that when you pass away, the death benefit does go directly to your beneficiary. It doesn't have to go in through probate or anything like that. You don't have to wait for the court to distribute it. It does go direct to your beneficiary. It's just that if you don't have anything set up to protect that inside of a trust or something, then the value of those funds will be included in your gross estate, even though the funds do go direct to your family. So they bump up your overall gross estate depending on how much of a death benefit you have. But that may or may not be any kind of issue for you. And also they do pass to your beneficiary directly tax-free, income tax-free. And this liquidity of the death benefit is something really great, and especially for the larger estates that may have a lot of their assets maybe in property or things that are not liquid. And so when your loved one passes away, if there is a high value in property or their business value, then the family has to rush to sell whatever they can in order to get the government their portion of the estate tax money that they're waiting for within 9 months. And so you don't want to have to be rushed to sell things that maybe you don't want to sell because it's something you wanted to keep or your loved one intended for it to stay in the family. Maybe you don't want to have to rush off and sell that. So the liquidity from the death benefit helps a lot in those situations. They can just pay the government, get them off their back, and it's done. They can keep the assets they want to keep. They don't have to fire sale the business to get Uncle Sam the amount that he's owed in tax. So to go over in more detail some of the expenses I listed out earlier, medical expenses, it's kind of amazing or crazy to think about that the majority of a person's lifetime medical costs is oftentimes incurred in the last 3 months of their life. And costs that were not covered by insurance or Medicare will become a debt of the estate. And then these costs must be paid before any distributions are made to any beneficiaries. Large medical costs could certainly deplete the full estate. Funeral costs was another thing on the list, and funeral costs are anywhere from $7,000 to $20,000. I'm sure they could be higher than that as well. It just depends on what a person wants to spend on their loved one, but the minimum isn't that low. You might think it can be really, really low, but it is still kind of expensive if you're not prepared for it. And especially during time of tragedy, now you're having to scrounge or ask for help or maybe set up a GoFundMe to help pay for this. In a time of tragedy, that's the last thing you want to be worried about is how to pay for the funeral. It's just so important to have some coverage for that so you're not depending on friends and family to help raise that money for you. The other big one I mentioned earlier is your surviving family members that were dependent on your income that may need cash to cover the everyday normal living expenses that they were paying when you were alive, when you both were earning that income together. If you're married, you have young children, even if you both work, a lot of times I hear, oh, my spouse works, they'll be fine if something happens to me. But you get used to and you end up building your life around what both of you earn together with your income. And then if one is gone, one income is gone, that can be a very large burden for your surviving spouse. And that person may need that value of your income to continue living the same lifestyle that they were before the person passed. And so, and especially in that time when it's a tragedies happened and now your children, everybody's sad and mourning. Do you really want the surviving spouse of a family to have to rush off and get 2 more jobs just to be able to afford all the household bills and make sure the children are taken care of? And now the children who are already devastated by losing a parent now basically have lost 2 parents because they never get to see mom or dad who are at work all the time now just to keep the household running. That certainly is an avoidable tragedy, having to rush around figuring out how you're going to pay the bills when one passes. Even just acquiring a term policy, if you're unable to begin the infinite banking concept right now and you're not able to save into the contract the way you want, a lot of people will say, I'll just wait until next year, my bills are paid off, or whatever it is, I'll be able to afford it then. Really, you should just lock in some term insurance until you're able to start your banking policy, and then we can convert that term and begin your policy when you're ready. But just locking in some sort of coverage so that your family is not left scrounging and scrambling, trying to figure out how to get by. Something was to happen to you unexpectedly. And so administrative costs was another thing on my list, and includes things like executor fees. You might list an executor on your will for who would take care of everything when you pass. Oftentimes, they will get paid, or you can state that they will get paid one way or the other, but usually an executor will be paid for that. It's a lot of work, a lot of things they have to do, and it's a lot of time spent. So I think that's fine and normal to have the executor be able to earn something to do that. Also, of course, there's attorney fees or CPA fees, anything like that for the final federal and estate tax and inheritance tax returns or income tax returns. There will be those fees. There also could be some probate costs. If your estate is running through probate, you didn't set it up in a trust that avoids probate, then you have to go through probate. And there may be fees for the appraisal of property or business. If you have a business, there may be an appraisal for those business assets, and there's costs in that. Now, there are certainly some ways to reduce the cash needs of your estate, which again, an estate planning attorney will be your best help in this area. You could reach out to an attorney. But of course, even with these alternate ways and strategies you can use to reduce the cash needs of your estate, what better way really than a life insurance policy that will just leave a windfall of cash at the very time it's desperately needed? So that's all I have today. I just wanted to cover in detail the different types of things and reasons why you would want to have liquidity and available cash quickly at your passing to help your family, primarily to get through all the stuff that they need to do and wrap up your estate, and also to take care of them when they're used to having that income. As always, thank you so much for listening in. You are very much appreciated. If you'd like to work together, if you'd like my help, you're welcome to reach out to Valerie at alphaomegawealth.com, and I would love to meet you, talk with you, and figure out what you're going through and how I could help you, how we could work together. I hope that you have a great week that you've been enjoying, and I hope this was helpful. Take care.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.